Welcome. I'm Phil Cornish, your host for Cornish Talks Common Sense, and we're here for another program today. And today I have a new topic I want to talk about, and that is how should we look at the role of China in the world today? Is China a good actor or a bad actor? How should we evaluate China? Let's come back and look at that in one moment. Welcome back. Today I want to talk to you a little bit about China. China is a story that can kind of fly under the radar of the thinking of most people in our world today. After all, they're a distant country from us. Should Canada and Canadians be concerned about China? I want to suggest to you that Canada and indeed the world should be concerned about the movements of China in our world today. Why is that the case? I want to examine today with you some of the topics that are relevant to that issue. Now, we've known historically that for decades now, China has been involved in stealing technology, particularly from corporations, many of them American corporations, and have been manufacturing knockoffs, as we know, by stealing the technology of other countries. And this kind of tactic has enabled them, of course, to keep prices low, together with the kind of low labor costs they have, and is skewing their economy much more favorably as compared to our country and the United States, where trade deficits with China are huge. So China has not been beyond playing economic games to favor themselves. Why is this being permitted? Well, historically we know that certainly as far as America's been concerned, they simply look with dollar signs in their eyes, look at the number of billions of dollars of potential purchasers, customers in China that we can sell to, and their eyes get big. So they overlook some of the misdeeds of China that they've perpetrated in the area, for example, as I've talked about, stealing technology. So dollar signs have influenced Americans and corporations to let this happen. And there is a cost to us, and there will be more costs going forward. What else is in play? Well, again, economically, we see currency manipulation. The renminbi, the Chinese currency, has been manipulated in ways to favor them against other foreign currencies and to aid in their worldwide exporting of goods. And so we know the amount of goods that are manufactured in China today. We see them all over our stores in North America. But there again is a cost to that for us. And then there are other things happening more subtly. Recently there have been stories about Chinese business people buying land, buying properties in strategic locations in Canada and United States. Recently there was a story where a Chinese company bought land next to a Air Force base, I believe in Montana, in the United States, and one certainly has to question why that location. Are there ulterior purposes that are going on there? So there are acts by China that threaten us as Canadians and Americans. And also what might not be on your radar is the extent of which China has taken over resources in Africa and now in Latin America. Their role in those continents has been overwhelming. They effectively have taken hostage many African governments by taking control of their resources by promising to build them infrastructure, roads and buildings and so on, but there's a cost and there's a price to pay. People have been naive at the Chinese program to control resources that are sorely needed by industry and technology in our world today. And China has significant control over many of the rare resources, minerals and metals and so on that exist in the world today. And that is a danger signal that is occurring, which people are not acting on. But it goes even deeper than owning foreign assets and foreign property. We of course know as well they're guilty of human rights abuses, and so we see that with the Uyghurs in China and concentration camps and other human rights violations that they've perpetrated. And then there are other ones that we don't really take note of like we should. How about the trafficking of fentanyl? Now we know that in the United States-Mexican border, there are huge amounts of drugs that are crossing the border there. Methamphetamine and fentanyl are two of the primary ones. And they are being trafficked across our border, across the American border, and smuggled in from Mexico. These drugs are manufactured and come from China. And the cost of that is the deaths of thousands and thousands of people, sometimes by accidental overdoses, as you've heard in many stories in the media lately. And the consequences of China effectively controlling the flow of drugs from Mexico into North America is an understated, terrible consequence that governments are really not taking note of, and certainly the present American government is not taking note of, with the loose controls they have over the Mexican border, really amounting to an open border situation. But I want to speak to you about one final issue actually, before I get to that, let me talk to you also about Taiwan. So you see the hegemony of the Chinese government trying to also exert control over Taiwan, and this sort of phony policy they have of Taiwan really being still as one with China and not really a truly independent country. So the influence that China has had on other countries, such as Taiwan and other South Sea islands, where they've taken on control over South Sea islands and so on that are in the sphere of influence of Japan and so on. So this kind of hegemony of China is causing and should cause alarm to other countries in the world. But I want to move on to the final one, which I think is just a salient point of how the government of China cannot be trusted. They are not an appropriate political or business partner for the world. They should be viewed as a pariah state. And so what I'm talking about is the introduction of COVID into the world. Now, you know there's been some controversy over that. Mostly you heard all the doctrinaire statements of the mainline media that talk about COVID originating in the wet markets of the Wuhan area of China. What has been suppressed by the news media is the allegation that the COVID virus was actually manufactured in a bioweapons laboratory in Wuhan. So it is not a coincidence that the laboratory in Wuhan is used by the Chinese for military purpose, for bioweapons research purposes, and is at the very location, that particular institution with that particular agenda and research program, in the very location that has been identified as the origin of COVID. Very few people have tackled that subject. A few have. Two of them are Matt Ridley, a very well-known science writer, and Nicholas Wade, science journalists who have not been afraid to raise the issue of China originating the COVID virus, quite likely as a bioweapon that has been perpetrated against the rest of the world, causing trillions of dollars of damage. And we should be frightened by that China would accept the costs that go along with COVID to further their agenda in the world and create this hazardous virus. And by the way, I should add that guess which laboratory is also doing research on the new monkeypox virus that's now coming out? Also a lab in China, and I believe the same one in Wuhan, that is now conducting research on that. People need to wake up and understand that the media is suppressing stories that talk about this kind of subject matter. Now let me tell you what kind of evidentiary backdrop there is for that. I don't say this out of speculation. I've told you in our program before that this is a program that seeks to base itself with evidence and with facts. So I want to read just very briefly to you from a story that was in last fall, an edition of The Spectator magazine from the United Kingdom. And I have that article with me today, and I want to take just a moment to talk to you about that. So that article by Matt Ridley, a well-known and highly respected scientist, talks about the origin story of COVID, and his subtitle is "The Lab Leak Theory Just Got Even Stronger." So what he concludes is he investigates very carefully and assiduously where bat populations existed and how they came probably from Laos, originally in Thailand, and were brought to the Wuhan lab, where they were investigated by the Wuhan lab, sponsored by American funding and research efforts. And one of the instrumental persons behind that research was a scientist named Dr. Peter Daszak. And Peter Daszak was very instrumental in undertaking the research for the enhancement of viruses connected to bat origins. And so Matt Ridley looks at the evidence of what has been found with respect to that research. And I want to quote to you the conclusion that Mr. Ridley ultimately comes to. So Matt Ridley has told us that the research indicates that there is a line that flows from the bat population taken from Laos to the Wuhan lab, research is undertaken, and COVID is unleashed. There is no evidence of any wet market infiltration by COVID. The wet market theory does not support COVID origin. And in fact, Matt Ridley tells us that it is beyond coincidence that the outbreak of COVID happened in a city, Wuhan, with the world's largest research program on bat-borne coronaviruses, whose scientists had gone to at least 2 places where the SARS-CoV-2-like viruses live and brought them back to Wuhan and no other place in the world. His case is compelling that COVID originated purposefully in China, in a lab at Wuhan, that has unleashed devastating results on the entire world. China should be held to account. They are a pariah that should not be supported the way that the world does. Hopefully, people will learn a lesson from this. Thank you for being with us today.